So on page 22, sworn statement, paragraph 90, I start dealing with what happened and what transpired on the 4th of September 2025. This report was presented by the BEC chairperson, Mr. Victor Hopper, to the Bid Adjudication Committee at its meeting held on the 4th of September 2025, Chair. During the deliberations, the BEC raised a number of substantive concerns regarding the evaluation outcomes and the contents of the report. Key among these were the absence of a clear justification for not recommending the highest scoring bidder across the various regions, as well as inconsistencies which were observed in the allocation of bidders to regions, including instances where the lower ranked or more expensive bidder were recommended without explanation. The BAC further noted concerns relating to the pricing and commercial viability. BAC indicated that certain bidders may have quoted unrealistically low prices, potentially affecting their ability to deliver on the required service, and confirmed that at least one of the bidders had acknowledged their inability to perform at the quoted rates in writing. However, the BAC found that these considerations were not sufficiently documented or substantiated within the report that was presented to the BAC. Additional concerns, including the absence of a final probity report confirming that all identified risk compliance issues had been adequately addressed, Chair. The lack of clarity on unit pricing and fee structures, particularly the inclusion of as and when required, which was key for this tender, and insufficient detail on the methodology applied to allocating regions to bidders. The BAC also raised concerns in compliance issues regarding operational practices, specifically the potential use of service providers across multiple regions without explicit provision in the tender specifications and the absence of clarity on the legal implications of such arrangements. Considering the above, the BAC resolved to refer the report back to BEC for revision. The committee indicated that it was not satisfied that the report adequately addressed critical issues related to bidder selection, to pricing, to integrity, probity confirmation, compliance with specifications of the bid, and the transparency of allocation methodology. The BEC was requested to address these matters comprehensively prior to submission to resubmission. The resolution here under has been attached as Annex to GM15 in the second bundle. GM15, Chair, has been catered for on 343 on the second bundle. So what we see on GM15, Chair, is an actual bid adjudication committee resolution, which outlines the recommendations which were brought on board by the BEC. It gives the clear explanation or guidance in terms of what transpired during the meeting and what were the concerns that were raised. We'll take note for argument's sake, Chair, on page 346. On 346 of this Annex to GM15, we summarized that it was agreed, therefore, that the report be referred back to BAC on the basis that BAC was not comfortable with the following. 1, the pricing per award leads to bulk pricing, and some of the pricing in the fee structures are as and when. BAC further notes that as and when is not standard pricing. The report does not provide an explanation as to why the highest scoring bidder has not been recommended.
Can you please explain the concept of as and when pricing?
So, Chairperson, it's a rate-based appointment, meaning there will not be illegal invasions every day. So if we do an appointment without clearly stipulating as and when, the bidders might take advantage of that and submit a monthly invoice, even when there was no work that has been done in terms of removal of illegal structures or invasion.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
The third aspect is that we as BAC were fully aware that this bid underweight property. However, the final property report was not provided to the BAC at this stage, confirming that all the concerns that were raised had been addressed. Concerns in terms of service provider used across all regions was a massive provision which wasn't catered for in the specifications. There was no clarity in terms of methodology used in terms of allocating regions to specific bidders. On the basis of that region, Chairperson, it was resolved that this tender be referred back by the acting chairperson of that day, as I was not in. I am the chairperson of BAC. If I'm not in, I am delegated to appoint an acting chairperson. On the bid adjudication committee, we sat on the 4th of September. The governance and support officer, who is a senior manager, was acting as the chairperson of the day.
But you were part of the process. It's just that when the document was signed, you were not there on the day.
No, Chair. I was not present at the BAC that sat on the 4th of September. I had appointed an acting chairperson to preside over the meeting on my behalf.
Again, it's just to try and understand how it works. So where you were reading now, second bullet, for example, it says the report does not provide, this is the BEC report you're referring to, it does not provide any explanation
Yes.
as to why the highest scoring bidder has not been recommended. Now, isn't it the function of the BAC to make its own determination on the basis of the report that you have received? Because you've received a report, and then you have members of the BEC, as you explained, attending that meeting. You ask them questions, and they respond and provide clarifications. If the report of the BEC, according to your determination as a BAC, there's the highest bidder who should have been recommended, is that not a determination that the BAC then makes instead of referring that back to the BAC? I'm just trying to understand how things work in practice, in fact.
In practice, Chair, had the BAC make a determination, there will be a breach in lines in terms of the delegation of authorities. 3 processes can be undertaken from a BAC. You can recommend for the award, you can cancel the bid if the irregularities or the issues picked up are uncurable in nature. 3, you can refer the matter back to the BEC for reconsideration. So in this instance, there was no certainty as to why. The report was not substantive in terms of why is this bidder, who appears to be the cheapest, not awarded. Yes, as the BEC, you give us a letter saying this particular bidder had confirmed, you tell the BEC that the bidder said they're unable to deliver. Their prices that they quoted, they will not be able to execute the work. But that's not attached in the BAC report, meaning when you do come back to BAC, we expect that letter authorized by that specific service provider who was the highest scoring bidder at this stage. So we don't make a directive because there will be a breach of process. We have to allow the BEC to make a determination. There must be consensus throughout the process. We make a determination, in some instance, it might not be well informed. So we need to ensure that the committee reevaluates this. They could come back to BAC and say, this bidder has not been awarded because of these reasons. We'll then have an opportunity to interact with the reasons that have been provided, either agree with them or disagree with them on the way forward. If this issue, for example, were to come up on the second round, Chair, and we're still uncertain, BAC could make a provision that we are now either uncertain whether we could proceed with this, irregularities that we are identifying are not cured, we would recommend for a cancellation of this bid. Or we have now received adequate explanation in terms of why this higher scoring bidder was not awarded, at which stage it might have fallen off the bandwagon, and then move ahead with the recommendation. So we'll not give a directive, we'll allow an opportunity for the committee to elaborate on this matter so that there's consensus throughout. We wouldn't want to force a decision down a committee, Chair. The delegation and segregation of authorities don't allow that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Chairperson, I will now move back to the sworn statement on page 24. I am proceeding to the second bid adjudication committee, which sat on the 18th of September on page number 24. So on page 24, the BEC comes back. Again, Mr. Victor Hopper, who was the chairperson of the BAC, comes to BAC. During his deliberations, the BAC raised several concerns relating to the compliance, probity, and transparency of the evaluation process. The committee emphasized that the requirement, once issues raised by the probity team have been addressed by the BEC, a final probity report must then be brought on board to give confirmation that indeed the identified concerns have been fully resolved. Chairperson, in this regard, the BAC noted that documentation provided on validity extensions reflected responses only from 5 bidders rather than all 57. There were no formal communication received from the probity audit team, the independent external probity audit team, that the matters that had been raised have been adequately resolved. On 97, I further state that the BEC resolved that the tender remained valid until the end. They responded that the tender remained valid until the end of September, and that the recent extension was just a precautionary measure to ensure that the validity upon finalization. It further undertook to ensure submission of all outstanding bidder confirmations, which it did. 98, the Bid Evaluation Committee also highlighted the need for greater clarity and transparency in the report, particularly regarding the methodology used to allocate regions. This comes up again as an issue which is not clearly dealt with as from the first referral back. The BEC indicated that the bid specifications did not prescribe specific allocation criteria. However, other than limiting bidders to one region, the Bid Evaluation Committee then decided to utilize the preference point system, which will be applied in terms of determining allocation of bidders, meaning 7 regions, 7 bidders, higher scoring bidder from 1 to 7 will be allocated in that order. 1, region 1, 2, region 2. That was the preference point system that were to be outlined. However, Chair, what the PAC took note of is that this application system was not clearly articulated in the report. The report that they'll bring to BAC now, yes, they are responding to us and they're telling us in the BAC, but it's not clearly articulated on the process of utilizing the preference point system to allocate bidders to regions. Additional concerns, Chair, were raised regarding the rationale for engaging in price negotiations only with certain bidders and not all, as well as inconsistencies identified in the probity findings. Specifically, the BAC noted a discrepancy where a bidder which was flagged by the probity team for non-compliance was nonetheless recommended for award without adequate explanation. This was a major red flag from us, which indicated that there was an inconsistency on the probity report and what the BEC was bringing to BAC. In paragraph 100, I summarize. In light of these concerns, the BAC resolved to refer the report back to BEC on the following directive. 1, provide clarity on the apparent inconsistency regarding the recommendation of a bidder previously disqualified by the external independent probity team. Obtain and submit a final probity confirming that all issues have been dealt with satisfactorily. Clearly document the methodology which will be applied to allocate regions to suppliers as per the preference point system that you are verbally telling us now. I'm then going to refer us to GM16 on the second bundle, which outlines the resolution that was taken by the Bid Adjudication Committee. Again, Chair, referring this report back in light of those discrepancies that were noted. GM16 has been captured on page 348. So you'll see now that there is improvement in comparison to GM15. Firstly, there's no blanket amount that is now given to each bidder. In the previous GM15, you would have said region 1, bidder 15, a holistic price of 250,000 for argument's sake. Now it's clearly articulated on what the pricing for personnel is, what the pricing for vehicles is, what the pricing for additional vehicles are, and it's on an as and when basis. I'll move further, Chair, in terms of that major difference in articulation on the improvements that were done by the BEC towards page number 353. Well, let's start at the bottom of 352, where during the discussions on the matter, the Bid Adjudication Committee meeting held on the 18th of September, the committee resolved the following. I've touched on this in my summary that after the findings provided by the probity team, they had been addressed by the BEC. The probity team must now provide a final report giving us assurance. You can't just tell us by word of mouth as BEC that probity team have confirmed the report is now fine, you can approve. We needed a portfolio of evidence to convince us as the BAC that indeed that certainty was obtained. Second point was, in terms of the probity team raised concerns on the validity of extensions, and the committee further noted that supporting documents in terms of validity extensions attached only for 5 bidders, therefore confirmation had been provided to the probity team, and this matter was resolved. Adequate evidence was provided within this BAC. We were comfortable with that. In their response, Chair, the BEC indicated as well that the tender was still valid. This was only a precautionary mechanism. However, I think what's key is in reference to the preference point system, which will now be utilized in breaking down the award of each. This is now captured on page 353, where that how the preference point system was applied should be included in the report, which is a significant determination on what we should do, Chairperson. There were also concerns raised in the report that do not provide reasons why the BEC negotiated with bid number 36. There was no adequate reasons for whom they considered prices to be high, but have not negotiated with other bidders like bidder number 40. It was very odd for BAC. Why wouldn't you conduct a bid negotiation for all bidders who are subjected to our prospective bidders? Similarly, on 21, that in their response, BEC indicated that they compared the VAT exclusive and inclusive price and benchmark provided by the department and the sourcing strategy as per the BEC report that I indicated earlier on, and noted that the inclusive price on NIST were higher, therefore opted for negotiation on this. They were of the view that bidder 40, for argument's sake, was within the sourcing strategy and was not above the pricing. But now on page 21, on the probity report, clearly indicated, Chair, that bidder number 2, without mentioning its name, well, I think I should, that on bidder number 2, Mnisi Security and Protection Services, Chair, did not submit 3 years audited financial statements. This is what was indicated in the probity report, mind you. However, they were disqualified, indicated the bidder did not have a 5-ton truck, therefore were disqualified. However, the bidder is being recommended for Region 5. That was a major concern that BAC had picked up, BAC had raised, we therefore had to refer the matter back. So in short, on 354, it was therefore agreed that the report be referred back to the BEC for them to consider the following. 1, provide clarity regarding the disqualification from the property team, where the external property team says, bidder number 2 of Mnisi Security Services must be disqualified, but the BEC, in any case, moves ahead with the recommendation. Major concern for us, we couldn't agree to this, it was referred back. Obtain a final property report, confirming that all matters have been addressed. Remember, I indicated, Chair, earlier that the BEC verbally indicated to the BAC that this bidder number 2, the matter was deliberated with the property team, it was effectively dealt with and they were compliant. However, we couldn't rely on that. We needed physical evidence in the form of a property confirmation report as we would normally have. Include in the report how preference point system would be applied. For those reasons, Chairperson, we therefore referred the report back. You'll take note, Chair, that I was back in this sitting. I was chairing this sitting of the BAC on this day, on the 18th of September 2025. Chairperson, I will now go back to paragraph 101 on page 25. I now deal with the outcomes of what transpired at the BAC on the 25th of the final BAC now, which sat considering this matter on the 25th of November 2025. During these deliberations, the BAC took note of further issues that bidder number 32, El Shaddai Security Services, bidder 35, Ngapashia Construction and Project, as well as bidder number 15, 2 Corps and Security Services, at this stage were non-compliant at the time of evaluation. Accordingly, the BAC directed that the provisions of SCM Regulation 43 be applied for these bidders. The committee further noted and accepted that the confirmation that all issues previously raised by the probity team had been satisfactorily addressed, as evidenced by the attached final proactive forensic assurance review addendum report that was provided, giving the BAC assurance that all these matters have been dealt with accordingly. On 105, I conclude on the outcomes of BAC that in light of the above, the BAC finally approved the recommendations of BAC subject to the implementation of Regulation 43. It was further noted that subsequent to verification through the centralized supplier database system, there was confirmation that was received that affected bidders were now tax compliant. The resolution of this sitting, Chair, has been captured as Annexure GM17. With your permission again, Chair, I will request that we move over to bundle number 2, to page number 355, wherein I want to take the committee through GM17. So in GM17, it's final resolution, and maybe we can start at page number 366. This is the final report that was now recommended for approval. It was recommended by myself as the chairperson of the BAC to the accounting officer for approval. It was subsequently approved after validation and confirmation by the accounting officer. So going up, Chair, in terms of the content of this report, BAC had taken note that all issues that had previously been raised have been adequately addressed. 1, the issue where a probity concern, which was identified, and there was confirmation received from the property team in the form of forensic assurance review report as an addendum attached by the external independent verifier that bidder number 2 was indeed compliant. That provided surety to us at BAC that all processes have been complied. The allocations per region were also clearly identified by the BEC, and a structure and a process flow was given to give direction that a subjective process was avoided, and that a process in terms of allocating bidders to regions in terms of the preferential point system was applied. This then, of course, Chair, led to the final shortcomings that were picked up, that 3 bidders, 32, Al Shaddai Security Services 35, Ngapeshia Construction and Projects 15, Two Cops and Security at this stage were non-tax compliant. If they are non-tax compliant by law, we need to give them 7 days. We need to notify them, say you are a prospective bidder, you need to ensure that your tax matters are in place. We will be giving you a formal 7-day period. This process is duly handled by the accounting officer's office. Confirmations are sent, responses are received from their end, and confirmations are received. This is the process which led to the final award from the Bid Adjudication Committee side, Chair. On that, Chair, I want us to now go back to page 26 on the sworn statement. I will now be proceeding with the probity report, the first one. What I've done now, Chair, I've outlined the process from an end-to-end spectrum, from the bid specification right through to Bid Adjudication Committee, and what the law designates us to perform on each of those functions, delegated as they are. On this aspect,
Mnisi, before you go to page 26, where you had stopped was on page 18, you were dealing with a table. And then you set out the process that took place, or the summary of events in each committee. And remember, Chair said I was hoping you will come back to this because you then went to the various annexures. For me, I need you to clarify paragraph 75, because based on what you have told us happened at the 3 BAC meetings, you can then influence the process, because you can say, why is this bidder not recommended? Why have you not given reasons for not recommending the one that has the lowest price? This bidder is non-compliant from a tax perspective. Give them time to do this and that. So can you then clarify what you mean by to demonstrate the fact that I could in no way influence the process? Because if you are a chairperson of the BAC and you participate in each of those meetings where you are able to send things back to the BEC, then it means you can influence the process. I would understand if you had framed the paragraph to read as follows: up to the stage of the BEC, you can't influence the process. But surely when it gets to BAC, you play a part there and you can influence the process to the point where you can even reject the BEC's recommendations.
okay. Thanks, Chair. Commissioner, I think firstly, we'll just need to understand how BAC is made up. BAC is made up of about 7 individuals. These are all senior managers within the city of Tshwane. They are appointed by the city manager. My role as delegated in terms of the SCM function is to be the chairperson of the Bid Adjudication Committee. So, Chair, influencing a process and directing proceedings in compliance with the relevant laws and regulations, from my perspective, is 2 completely different issues. So if we were to analyze and scrutinize documentations in front of me, applying the rules, laws, and regulations and prescripts of the law, it's not a process of influencing, it's a process of validating, providing assurance, and ascertaining that all key compliance mechanisms have been followed. So, Chair, with respect, I would like to maintain the statement that I do not influence, but I play an oversight in terms of ensuring that all due processes are followed accordingly at the stage of the Bid Adjudication Committee.
Please continue.
Thank you so much, Chair. I was on 105. On 105, I now deal with the probity report and the outcome thereof. Chairperson, Group Audit and Risk is a department within the city which is formally engaged and mandated to conduct a probity audit on the tender under consideration. In executing its mandate, GAR, short for Group Audit and Risk, further appoints an independent external legal firm to provide specialized legal support and to ensure an objective, comprehensive probity review prior to matters being presented to and considered at the bid adjudication level. It's an additional step that we have put on board as a result of the deficiencies that we had picked up in the past in terms of shortcomings on matters of compliance. On page 106, Chair, I deliberate that the primary objective of a probity audit is to provide assurance that the work of the BEC adhere to all applicable supply chain management prescripts, legislative requirements, and governance standards. This includes verifying that evaluation process was fair, transparent, consistent, and compliant, that all bidders recommended for the award fully met the administrative, technical, financial, and statutory requirements of this tender. The probity process further entailed the identification and assessment of potential risks, irregularities, deviations, and the provision for corrective recommendations to ensure full compliance prior to adjudication. In this regard, it is important to note that the probity findings and recommendations carry significant governance weight and are regarded as authoritative. As such, they are required to be fully addressed and resolved and cannot be disregarded or overridden without appropriate justification and due process within the applicable regulatory framework. The detailed probity report has been attached as Annex to GM in the second bundle, GM 18. Again, Chairperson, with your permission, I would love us to go to GM 18. And it is situated on page number 367. On page 367, Chair, 368, you'll take note that Group Audit and Risk makes a submission to the accounting officer. It's a proactive forensic assurance review report into tender TMPD 01, 2024-25 for the Tshwane Metro Police Department. They further take note that the completed final proactive assurance review report form part that will notify your office on the 4th of April, meaning the accounting officer's office was given a go-ahead, an indication that the probity team will be conducting an audit or an assurance exercise before TMPD 01, 2024 is awarded. Attached, of course, is drawn to your attention the final report that has been presented. Within this report now, Chair, if I could explain in short, it's a mirror exercise by a team of external, independent individuals who do exactly what the BAC has done, meaning they obtain all documents that have been provided to them. They look at pre-compliance. They look at administrative compliance. They look at mandatory compliance. They look at the POE that has been provided for the fourth step in terms of physical site assessments, and then they look at the preferential procurement system and the allocation of bidders. That process is conducted from scratch by this independent external law firm in order to validate that all matters and all compliance issues have been dealt with accordingly. So within this, Chair, of course, will take note that findings have been raised on 372. These are the findings where the BEC must ensure that they're adequately dealt with before the matter comes to BAC for approval. That process undertakes itself, and if you look at this, Chair, they designate the process that is followed. On page 357, they clearly articulate the mandate and why they're doing this process. It's a critical function to ensure that we avoid incurring additional UIFW as a city. It's a significant step or internal control that was instituted, that wasn't previously there, Chair, at the City of Tshwane. We brought this new internal control on board in order to reduce instances of irregular expenditure that was ballooning to the top as a city. This was a new internal control that was brought on board. The work that is done here is clearly to articulate whether all functions have been performed accordingly. So if you look at the outcomes of this report, Chair, for argument's sake, I want to take you, without going to the details of the report, I have explained in short that it is an evaluation by an external legal independent party who's got no interest whatsoever at the city. They then come up on page number 387, for argument's sake. On 387, they're providing us with findings on the administrative compliance stage. And they say, we've taken note of these bidders. We confirm that these bidders must be disqualified for these reasons. This is mirrored and checked against the BEC report. A checklist exercise is conducted. There's an agreement in terms of all bidders that are disqualified or all bidders that move over to the second stage of the bid evaluation process. This is a confirmation now that is obtained by the probity report. I'm going to move on to 391 of the same report. 391, item 11.5. Probity report gives guidance that the following bidders complied with administrative compliance and were therefore evaluated to go through to the second stage. They list the bidders, 12